What up, friends? It's your boy Robin back. This is Enjoy the Hostilities, YouTube, and if you're listening on podcast, that's the coolest thing ever. Thank you for hanging out. I'm Robin. I commentate fighting for a living. I analyze fighting. I study martial arts. I study it in as deep a detail. I ask a lot of questions, and I follow my curiosity, and then I share what I find. A lot of my jobs, like commentary and analysis, require me to do a lot of study and then try to narrow things down in such a way that I can get concise analysis out. My television job here in Canada, which I adore, people are watching TV, and they need you to make sense of Cain Velasquez in 2 minutes. That sounds easy, and it is in a lot of cases if you're just going to, say the things that you say. But if you want to go deeper, it requires a lot of peeling and studying and analysis and deep diving and trial and error and exploration. And that's what this is. This is all the things I used to do, the ideas I used to share, the things I used to write down before YouTube and my friend Mark, who is behind the camera, and podcasts and all that existed. Now I get to do it with you guys. So it's very meandering, it's very explorative, and I love doing it, and I value the people who would come along for the ride, especially the podcast. No offense to YouTube people. It's a nice looking place. It's fun. We're going to spruce this up in the next few weeks. But it's really neat that you would just put it on and go for a run or work out or drive your car or skip out on work or whatever. So thank you. And hey, if you're not an explorative type or you don't like to fool around with crazy ideas, then no offense. No offense. We're not going to hang, and that's okay. There's a great big world. So here we are. Enjoy the hostilities. We have tended to take 2 or 3 different topics. Well, 3 or 4, and it's my job to explore them. As I said, just very quickly, exploring them is part of the process. To everyone you see ever on TV that's an expert in food or cars or whatever, the real work was done when you weren't looking. And a lot of it is nonsense, and a lot of it is studying how the engine of the car works in such a way to make sense of something and new ideas, and a lot of it lays on the floor and is never touched on. Hours and hours and hours of study and pulling in to get somebody to talk about a car for 1 minute. And that's really fun, but this is fun to do. So this is what you do to try to search for expertise. Before we talk about what we're talking about, if you're watching on the thing, you'll see this book in my hand. If you're not, this book is from my friend sent me this book. His name's Erwan, and this is called The Practice of Natural Movement. I have studied with Erwan. I spent a full day looking at the layers of the top layer, just the outside layer of his philosophies and his knowledge in how human beings move. It was a cool day of training. Carlos Condit was training, and a bunch of his other experts or teachers and people accredited in the system. But Erwan is a friend. I like him very, very much, and I like the way he thinks, and I like the way that he sees human movement and fighting. So I haven't read the book yet. Thank you, Erwan, for sending it to me. I can recommend, despite the fact that I haven't read it, I can recommend it because I know his ideas are brilliant, and this is what he's dedicated his life to. And those are the people you want to learn things from, people who have dedicated their lives to things. But so I can recommend it. Will be good, but I haven't read it yet. I will read it on the plane. Fighting is movement, right? What's a punch? My brain coming up with a concept or responding to stimuli and getting my body to move in such a way that I've trained, or that I'm free to express myself, or that is built around my athletic platform or my attributes or emotion or whatever. It is freedom of movement. It is expression. It is expression through movement. That's fighting. That's all it is. So I study a lot of movement. The job is interesting. I'll get to the topics in a second. The obsession, it's not a job. That's not my job. This is my obsession. The obsession is fascinating because you have to understand how the body moves. Then you have to understand how humans move. Not just your body. His foot goes here, hip goes here, hand goes like that. But what's the process? What's the electrical process by which the brain causes locomotion in your body? Well, how does that happen? How is that affected by fear, anxiety, stress, all of these things? What's happening there? What's the history of these things? What's the science? Well, how does performance work? What did we know about performance yesterday and that, we didn't know the day before? All of it. It is fucking fascinating. Quick shout out to my friend, Dr. David Klonsky as well. We've achieved a little further work on our book It's tentatively titled 90% Mental, or 95% mental, or 100% mental. I don't know. But it's a book that two of us as friends are writing about combat sports psychology. So we're going to do more and more of that this year. He's a professor at University of British Columbia. He's a good friend. Dave, if you're seeing this, I haven't told you this. I was going to send you a DM today. I think I'm going to come and visit you for 2 days and just stay in a hotel, and then we can go for a few long walks and shoot some shit in our brains, because I'm enjoying working on the book. And if we get together for a few days, we can go further. Sorry to meander. This is what I do. I appreciate the people who are like, yeah, the actual thing starts at whatever time. But then there's certain other people who see that this is the thing. I didn't come here to talk to you about, well, I did come here to talk to you about Jon Jones and Anthony Smith. But a podcast is about thought, how thinking works, how talking works, how exploring works, trial and error, how and why do people express themselves a different way. I didn't just come here to tell you that Jon Jones is the most dynamic fighter in the UFC. But typically what we've done is we've come up with categories of things I wanted to talk about in an old school way, like Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith, early analysis. That's what we've done. And then I would do that. Mark just asked a question today and said, well, why don't you start with that? And I'm like, fuck, let's just say it. So we're starting with, will Jon Jones underestimate Anthony Smith? Now, if you know me, if you don't, hi, Robin, talk about fighting and analyze martial arts. If you do know me, you know that I'm not just going to try to answer that, because there are 3 answers that are typical. Yes, Jon Jones will underestimate Anthony Smith. No, Jon Jones will not underestimate Anthony Smith, or other. That's it. I'm not interested in any of those answers. Also, I don't have any of those answers, and nobody has any of those answers. The main person that we might think would have that answer is Jon Jones himself. John, are you going to underestimate Anthony Smith? No fucking way, bro. That's what he would tell you, you know? And listen, if I in any way make any type of joke about Jon Jones, or act a certain way or say a tone, don't fucking get anything messed up. I admire brilliant martial artists. That's why I do this. And Jon Jones is a fucking brilliant martial artist. He's a brilliant individual. He is a unique human being. So when I say, no way, bro, I'm not making fun of Jon Jones. I'm just playing. It's just fun. But he would tell you, no, there's no chance I'll underestimate Anthony Smith. But here's for me, here are the fascinating ideas. Here are the fascinating theories. Here are the fascinating things to dig through. One of them is, he can't possibly know that. He can't possibly know that. And because what is it to underestimate someone? Well, first of all, you'll only know the truth later. So whatever you think he is, either he's more than that, and then you have underestimated him, right? If you think, well, man, this guy, I'm not underestimating him, bro. So where are you estimating him then? And the reason I bring this up is a lot of I don't make up anything. I theorize things. I explore things. I've thought experiments. When they fail or are incorrect, I go, shit, that was wrong. And then we go down a different route. But a lot of the information that I get, the largest percentage of it comes from somewhere. It comes from a coach, a teacher, a fighter, someone I look up to, a mentor. You know, that's books, science, research. This is, I mean, bro, Jon Jones is the best, man. He's never underestimated anyone. That's not information. I'm trying to get real information. So what I'm saying about this is Anthony Smith, and where Jon Jones estimates him, only we will know if he underestimated him after, because there is the reality of what he is, and there is what you think he is. Why is it any of this matter at all? Like, and I could feel completely logical eye rolling that anyone can have. What? I mean, who cares? The reason this matters, and the reason I said this information comes from places, is because George St. Pierre told me this matters. Firas Zahabi, his coach, told me this matters with specific examples. George and Firas believe that their level of performance, which by their own admission was underperforming, against Dan Hardy, brilliant martial artist, brilliant guy, wonderful human being, incredibly talented martial artist, and really smart, analytical guy, great television dude, great analyst. Fuck. Dan wouldn't take this as any type of insult, and George certainly doesn't mean it as any type of insult, but George overestimated Dan Hardy. Now, why would you overestimate someone? Because this is Dan Hardy. This is the fear of underestimating Dan Hardy. And then you begin to expect something. And you actually, in your mind, and this maybe deserves to seem and be read as a compliment for Dan. In your mind, Dan is bigger, stronger, faster, more talented even than he is. And you might think that's a good place to be. You might think, well, that's better than underestimating him, because if he's faster than you think he is, fucking hits you and stuff. It is also bad. Overestimating your opponent is very, very, very dangerous. Now, in this case, George was able to defeat Dan, and I don't think he had any injuries, I don't believe. And I think he won all the rounds, which he was doing at that time. He was defeating everybody by winning most of the rounds. But he didn't like his performance. His coaches didn't like his performance. And, of course, credit for that goes to Dan Hardy. Excuse me. I make my throat dry from just fucking going on and on and on. That's what I do. Of course, Dan deserves, and Dan's team, coaching, preparation, talent, knowledge, everything deserves credit for that, of course, and they would give credit to that. But if you believe someone is more dangerous than he is, it can make you hesitate. If you overestimate somebody, you can underperform. You know, and a big one, the way they looked at that one is they put his, because Dan is such a crisp and clean and talented striker who at the time, it was much more segmented back then than it is today. The way that we still do this, but it's not true anymore. We'll be like, well, this guy's striking is here, but his wrestling is here. And I know I say this a lot, but it's because it's important. That is not how it is now. None of that is true. That's just TV shit. It's left, and TV shit is usually left over from people developing systems and formulas that get followed even when they're no longer relevant. And a lot of the world is like that. As you see, you know, I'm sorry to tangent for a moment, but as you see certain companies failing in the world, it's because they're still following formulas that are no longer logical or no longer make sense in the reality of the world around them. And so they falter, and then people end up going somewhere else. So that's why I say, you know, it isn't, you can't segment it into these things anymore. I know that's an easier way to do it, but it isn't the truth. But back then it was a little more true. So they looked at Dan, and Jake Shields was a part of, I'll talk about Jake Shields in just a moment. George did this on a few occasions. He overestimated his opponents. So Dan at the time, they tried to get an estimate of how he was on the ground on his back. And they were like, we can beat this man here. He's a great martial artist, but I believe we can win here. Then they looked at the wrestling. Back then, again, you could segment it that way then. That's not so now, which is why, you know, a fight between Max Holloway and T-City is not, well, if he gets, you know, it's not just grappling and wrestling or whatever. It's control of how engagements take place. But it was like, well, if we get a hold of him, we can take him down. And then they estimated, they're like, but we cannot strike with this man. That made them underperform, because that shouldn't be a truth. But if you put somebody on a pedestal, and you overestimate them, that is just as bad as underestimating. Now, in this case, not as bad as a consequence or an outcome, because George won those fights. Jake Shields was something similar, in kind of in reverse. We're only going to do this because we don't want to do this. Again, he won those fights. It is not anything incorrect, especially of the time. But now you cannot go, man, I can't go to the ground with Damian Maia no matter what. Actually, sorry, that was a potential way to look at it. Conor McGregor, so busy after with the ground on Khabib. So busy after sort of where he puts him at the ground on Khabib. That's why Khabib was able to hit him. Was he fast? Was that a nice right hand? Did he throw it in an interesting way? Is Khabib way slicker and more talented, deceptive than people think? Of course. Does he deserve the credit for knocking down Conor McGregor? Of course. But if you overestimate this, or even correctly estimate that aspect of it, it distracts you from the other. So overestimating is just as bad of a situation. So that's one. Again, we're back to, will John Jones underestimate Anthony Smith? I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that. And again, John doesn't either. Nobody does. But the reason these questions are so good, and the reason I appreciated Mark proposing it this way, was because it allows us to explore, what do these things mean? In truth, what do they mean? John Jones is a genius. He's a physical genius. He's far, far, far more of a mental genius in performance and martial artistry than people understand. I think a lot of people do, Mark, probably, right? A lot of people get that this guy's brilliant. He's not just strong and long and athletic.
Especially on fight night. That's when it shines the most.
Big time.
Everything else, they underestimate it because of everything else. But then when fight night comes around, they're like, oh, shit, he's the real deal.
Fuck. On the night, man. And this is a slight curveball here, but John Jones can never just assume that'll be so. That isn't inherent. And that's a result of preparation.
The funny thing is, he'll only know that night when it doesn't go on, when he's like, wait, what the fuck?
Yep. Let's look then at sort of how you position your opponent and how you assess him. That's the beginning of this conversation. The next part of this conversation is the realities of what's happening, right? So the best of the best, when you look at Jones and Gustafsson, or Jones and Cormier, especially the second times where he already had the information now, that's fucked. That's fucked. That's another thing John Jones, people aren't giving him the credit for. The ability to learn. He learns on the fight night. He learns in the moments. But then it was like that familiarity. It's like, oh, yes, right. I kinesthetically understand where you are and what's going on and how you move and the relationship between us. It's in many ways the best guys. And Max Holloway I'll put here too. And Jones and who else is that sort of in the way that they move? Just Stephen Thompson in some ways. Who?
Stylebender.
Yes, yeah. Izzy, that's a really good one too. Actually, let's put Izzy in a separate category for just a second, although it's a great example, because that leads me to where we're going next. What's happening on some level is it isn't, so think of their bodies, and if you're listening on podcasts, I'm just holding up my hands in kind of random ways as if these are bodies. It isn't, if the bodies are solid and everything else is clear between us, it isn't the bodies and what they're doing, it's the space between the bodies that is the mastery. Okay? Now, Mark, maybe you can plop in right here, and maybe he can't. I'm asking him, and if it pops up, well, it pops up. But that picture of two faces that are kind of kissing, and in between them is like a bottle or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know?
I'll put that graphic up.
Yeah, okay. So right now, if you're looking on YouTube, I'm not just pointing my fingers at the camera here. You're seeing a picture of two faces that kiss, and between them is another shape. That shape is where the mastery is. It isn't in the faces as you continue to look at it. The faces are there. You see them. They are not what you're controlling on some level. John Jones is controlling the space between those faces. Okay? And we could do this with almost anything. Can you hand me one of my things? And I'll keep talking. And in the bookcase behind you, there's a marker. So you'll see Mark pop in here. Say hello to him. We could do this with anything, right? We could go in and if we draw anything, just bear with me. I've got a marker thing in my mouth. And if we are on podcast, well, maybe pop in on YouTube. But I think I can describe what's happening. As I color in these shapes, you see these shapes are John Jones and Gustafsson. You see the shapes. I'll take the marker out of my mouth. That's John Jones. His body is moving. And this is the other guy's body. But fuck the shapes. Look at the space in between it. The space between it. This is the space between your shoulder and head. And this is the space between where your feet are and where John's hand has to go. It's all one. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not showing up. It's all one thing, but it is how you manipulate the space. So if and I know this sounds crazy to some people, and I understand it, but this is, you can think of things in many different ways. If we expand this is an arm moving somewhere, or this is something popping up. Yes, we moved the black, we moved the color, but what changed was the space. And on a high level, I know this sounds super nebulous, but on a high level, that's the difference between what Jon Jones does and what Matt Hughes did. Matt Hughes was a fucking genius of his era. But it wasn't because wrestling is the strongest base for mixed martial arts. That's what we knew then. But what we know now is Matt moved his body through space in search. Matt is one of these blobs. He's in search of the chin of the other blob. What Jon Jones does is fuck with the space between the chin and the hand, or fuck with the space between the elbow and the knee. Right? So one guy moved himself through space, and the other guy, and you see them all doing this. Once upon a time, the attacker pushed, and the other guy moved back or moved in, then wrestling took place. Now it is a moving, it's a floating, it's a distribution, and it isn't where I am or what I'm doing. It's what we're doing. It's how the relationship between our weapons and targets and each other and our feet are. And I know that sounds fucking all real nebulous and fucking coffee shop shit, but that's what's happening. Jones understands that. Jones and Holly Holm and Wonder Boy and Conor McGregor, that's what they're doing.
I think it would even be safe to say that with that space, he manipulates the opponent to underestimate that space, because you see with Glover, even recently with Gustafsson, he does that shoulder crank.
Yeah.
So now with you throwing that punch with that injured arm, that space is not real anymore. It's all distorted.
All of it happens, right? What you're trying... So let's just say my goal is to touch you. And this is the weapon I'm going to use. I can move it up, I can move it down, or I can make you move. But it's by manipulating the space between us. And that comes from sensitivity, that comes from feel, that comes from exploring the essence of the truth of the fight. And somebody who dances, someone who paints, a high-level jazz saxophonist, this makes sense to all of those people. To a lot of you, you're like, well, Robin's really fucking gone off the deep end this time. Again, this is where I explore these things. This is not the perfect way to describe it yet. But if I do this 2 or 3 or 4 times, I'll get it down into a 1-minute chunk, and then I'll be able to explain it in such a way that it will make sense, and I can influence the influencers, and it will become a normal part of conversation. That's my job, and that's what this is. So that's how different Jon Jones is. And he was on the front end of it again. Some of the other people I mentioned are a part of it. Holly, very early in women's fighting, understood this on a much higher level than other people. Conor McGregor, that's what he's been doing from day one. The Wonder Boys of the world, all these people, that's what they're doing. Then everybody kind of started to learn it. 4 years back, look at the way people moved, or 5, and then look at them now. Just retreating alone barely existed when Matt Hughes was dominant. And that's not a knock against Matt Hughes or George or fucking Dan Hardy or any of these guys who fought in those eras. They were channeling the knowledge and the feel of martial arts as it was available to them. And then people innovate and push and pull, and these ideas become, some of them just feel them. I got to train with Chad Laprise, who's a very, very brilliant mover. And he couldn't, if I had a chat with him about this, some of him would be like, oh, fuck, Robin's probably smoking that weed, which I'm not, by the way. And Chad is, a very religious man who doesn't do any of those things. So he wouldn't understand what that necessarily means anyways. But some people might just think you're crazy. But if you sit with them long enough and you talk to Anderson Silva about this, he understands it, right? So now, the next wave of guys, as they were developing, they had learned punches and kicks and footwork and wrestling, the double leg, the defending of the double leg, guillotines and triangles and all the building blocks. And then they had to shift gears into, wait a second, there's a lot more art and a lot less science happening in how people are winning now. So they had to shift gears in that. And that's what Anthony Smith would have had to do, just like Jones did, or Jones was on a front end of this even before he understood that he was, because he's just so talented as well as smart. And he was put on earth to do this. So he's on the front end of it. Anthony Smith would have developed this. What's he got, 30 fights, 35 fights?
Yeah, roughly.
Maybe more. I mean, I don't know. I got my shit here somewhere. Mark will look it up. He's got a shockingly large amount of fights. That feel and sensitivity comes together. And that feel and sensitivity is something that's very hard to decipher when you look at an Anthony Smith fight. Now, the last Anthony Smith fight also, overcoming...
Yeah, he's got about 44 fights.
44 fights.
Strikeforce veteran.
He started learning early. So he learned the way Matt Hughes learned, or the way that the champions of that era learned. And then he had to feel his way through it. And now, at 44 fights, and it's something we'll talk about in one of the other segments when we talk a bit about Aaron Pico later. If you're listening to the podcast, you'll hear it. And if you're watching this as a segment, just go find that. We'll have that on the YouTube page. Is Anthony Smith starts experience gives you feel. So you go watch you ever watch jazz musicians? Yeah, you know.
I observed.
You see that 55-year-old guy walk up to the sax. That guy's not he's improvising, but it's fitting in perfectly. And a kid in high school can't necessarily do that. Although, this is my point, they learn it a lot fucking faster now. They learn it a lot faster. What's my point? That's a good question. But what's my point is Anthony Smith's, that feel is the thing we don't talk about. That feel is the thing that's hard to estimate. That feel is the thing that we haven't yet, it's part of why I'm here, learned how to do that on ESPN or Fox or TSN where I work or any of these places, because we got to dig in and over time find ways to make sense of this in a way that a regular person can see.
And I think another thing that's telling when you talk about the feel, I think how it's acquired, if you look at his record,
Yep.
early on, 4-fight losing streak,
Yep.
goes on a winning streak, then 3-fight losing streak. I think it's within those
and that's
streaks.
learning that's learning in the reality.
Right.
You know what
And those aren't even a high level, like the very first losing streak, regional scene. Yeah. So it's the ideal learning.
Exactly. And you know what? We were going to talk about Jose Aldo next, but we'll move from this into Aaron Pico because it's a natural progression. Listen, it's like I would never. I'm an Anthony Smith fan, by the way. I got something about him. He's got something way more than we're seeing, and it's not that X factor of how to sell a fight. Not that X factor. This living, breathing connection to the fight. That's fucking real. Now, this is what, as much as I am an Anthony Smith fan and a John Jones fan, so when I say that, wouldn't you be excited for a guy like Anthony Smith to be the guy? I don't mean that in any way to undermine the fucking genius of John Jones. I admire the man. I enjoy watching him fight. I don't cheer for winners to lose, I don't want either guy to lose, but one of them has to. Well, actually, they don't. It can be a draw. It can be a fucking DQ. It can be all kinds of shit. But I wouldn't. So what I was going to say is I would never ever advise somebody to become great, and he is great, the way Anthony Smith became great, and that is learning in the fire, because it's too fucking hard. And did he get here? Where he now can handle it. That last fight, he fucking overcame some setback and pain and a few lost positions. You need that. But at 40 fights, some of us could have fucking had knee surgeries and it's over. They could have had shoulder destruction and it's over. They could have nagging headaches. They could be in a situation where they can't take a punch anymore.
They could just gave up financially.
They could give up.
This is it. I'm done. I tried.
Yeah, financially or even just, psychologically.
Yeah.
At fight number 26 and, hey, man, I'm making $9,000 a fight, but, hey, I just got on with the fire department. They're paying $65 in a city where a house is only $90,000. Fuck, and I'm spitballing that. I don't know. He does have a real job from what I recall. He had a real job for a long time.
When you start having more fun teaching.
Yeah.
You
open a school, of course.
That's usually how it happens.
Of course. It's another reason why a guy like this is not to be underestimated. And two things on the thought where I was heading. One is because they fucking lived their whole life for this moment. The other problem with that is you lived your whole life for this moment. You can fucking people crumble under the weight, and I ain't shitting on Gustafsson. And shit, when you get hit by Anthony Johnson, you get hit by Anthony Johnson. But Gustafsson in a stadium in Sweden, and please don't, this is not judgment. These are human beings doing the best they can. Nobody has the expectation that anybody should be able to have their best moment when their whole life is led to a moment. But ultimately, that's what we're asking of you. That's the greatness and the beauty of this. It is that moment you have it. And you hate on Conor McGregor all you want. But in almost every situation, that motherfucker comes through.
I know.
And that in and of itself, holy fuck, to come through like that with Alvarez and Aldo, you judge him however you want. You fucking make fun of him or hate him. But that's forever. And, you know, that's forever. And that's why it's so hard.
Yeah, because there's other guys that have fought that will look back at their fight and think,
if
Jesus
only.
Christ, what, like, not to call anyone out, obviously, but you know, the one name that always pops up in MMA discussions, Todd Duffy. Yeah. If Todd Duffy looks back at his earlier fights from his calm and collected versus his fight versus Frank Mir,
or even
he would not be
Alistair.
happy. Alistair,
yeah, for sure. But shit, you do not judge these people. They're the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that gets there. They've accomplished everything. And then they get there with everything, all the skills and experience to do it. And that's still that fucking hard. It's been your whole life. And you know who else? I just said Conor McGregor. Fucking John Jones.
Yep.
Every time. Every time. Every fucking time.
Jones is the ultimate game day fighter.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Every time. When it comes down to it. And, you know, and even George St. Pierre, we just talked about it. He won those fights, but he didn't perform perfectly on those nights. Now, he was so good that he was able to draw from those experiences, and it made him even better. Jones been tested. He's been pushed, and that's good. But that fucking guy just, on the night,
it's like he enters the cage and let's see how far we can push this.
Yeah. I heard from a lot of the old school guys early on, before they thought of anything, as they were contextualizing the fight. I find this kind of shit fascinating. The old school guys who didn't know everything. They didn't know what you knew. Everybody didn't understand every move and everything. And it was just so much unknown. They would look at it and they would look at you. So one of them is fighting me. They would look at me and be like, fuck wrestling or kicking or punching or any of these things. If you lock me and that man, this is, you know, one of these old school, real proven guys. You lock them and that man in a room, they'll tear them apart. They go in with the knowledge that life or death, me or him, it's me. And these guys believe it. And they're right.
Mm-hmm. Well, it boils down to, you know, the fighter versus the athlete.
Yeah. And there was an interesting series of conversations I was having on Twitter with people who were asking what martial art is better, and would a guy with 6 months of boxing beat a guy with 6 months of jiu-jitsu? And, you know, how long has this UFC thing been going? 25 years? What year are we talking about?
Yeah, I think we're in 25 now.
I forget. 25, right?
Now we're in
26. Yeah. The shirts say 25, you know. That's what this whole fucking 25 years has been about, trying to answer that. So we can still argue it if you want, but people are like, guy with 6 months of boxing versus 6 months of jiu-jitsu. I think, and somebody would say, I think the jiu-jitsu guy wins more than 50% of the time. And my answer was, the guy who's mentally tougher and more committed wins 75% of the time, regardless of what he trained for 6 months.
It's like that from that movie, Al Pacino, Any Given Sunday.
Any Given Sunday.
He has that line that's the guy who's willing to die is going to win that inch.
That motherfucker is John Jones every time. Now, that's not necessarily Conor McGregor. He's just going to be, he has some ability to perform under the highest levels of stress. And in fact, there's no way to gauge this. We don't know exactly where it happens in the brain. You don't have some type of thing to read the nervous system and see where it lives. But for whatever reason, he has found the ability to use stress to amplify his performance. And that's the rarity of him. Jones, on the other hand, is that guy who will fucking die in there, put the two of you or him and two other guys in a room somewhere, and teeth, claws, whatever, he will tear them to pieces. Yeah. And he starts with that. Then he adds genius. And then he adds his awareness and his feel and his ability to make it up as he goes along, and talent and skill. And there's a whole lot of greatness there.
And then you mix in the big brother attitude that he always carries in the cage, you know?
Yeah.
Like where
that's part of it, though.
Where he sons people.
Yeah, that sort of like, listen, son vibe that he gives, that's part of that. I'm better than you.
Breaking around, pushing off people like that. Yeah. Like, he has that big brother attitude that
he's got a lot of shit.
People, I'm telling
he's got a lot of that's a lot of reasons. Now, so can Anthony Smith beat him? Yeah, right? And this will be my answer. That's not an Anthony Smith. I'm a big fan of Anthony Smith. And when we talk about underestimate, not that this matters, but I think most people underestimate him. You know why that doesn't matter? Because it doesn't matter what fucking any of us think. It's irrelevant, which is why sometimes our arguing about it seems so strange. Has no bearing on the reality of what we're seeing. However, having said that, this is not an accrediting Anthony Smith thing, although I think he is special. This is a insert any top 40 205-pound fighter in the world in this sentence. Can they beat John Jones on Saturday night? Yes, they can, because he's human, and humans can be beaten. Humans can be beaten. And, you know, again, there's many things we lie about, sometimes purposely, sometimes because we don't understand it, but things like chin, that's not a thing, and it doesn't just go. Like, it's not a score that fucking, there are points of the body where one is struck, you know, where one is struck in such a way that they can be KO'd, you know? There are points, the chin score doesn't carry up to the point. The coup contra coup injury is when the brain bumps in the fluid to both sides of the skull. That thing happens to people with, regardless of their 100 million score in Dungeons and Dragons on chin, right? So you can't say, well, no, he can't hurt him. Of course he can hurt him, you know? So he can hurt him, he can get him. And the best, the John Jones level of the best, they know this is true. And that, to circle all the way back, that's one of the things that allows them to rarely underestimate these people. Because, yes, OSP could beat John Jones. Did he? No. Would he very often? No. Could he? Yes. Of course he could. Of course he could. Some jackass came up to me at this thing I was at, and he's like, Robin, I love your work. Hey, bro, though, really, did you really think Conor McGregor actually could beat Floyd Mayweather? Yes, he could. He could. Did he? No. Was it likely? No. But could he? Yes, he could. Can Anthony Smith defeat John Jones? Yes, he can. Could fucking Henry beat TJ Dillashaw? Yes. I don't have to get into fucking early stoppages and shit about that either. Because also, that's part of it. Could Anthony Smith defeat John Jones? Yes. But it was an early stoppage, bro. Still a win, right? Like, the question isn't do it in such a way that there's no debate either. It's like, could you defeat, can OSP defeat John Jones? Yes, he could. And then people's response to that is like, no, I saw the fight. He couldn't. On a different night, in a different setting, with different series of variables, yes, he can. Because of that, John Jones will be prepared. And a prepared John Jones is really fucking hard to defeat. Yeah, so hard that it's never happened ever. And there's a real chance, I was saying this on Periscope, when I say everyone loses, we all know that's not totally true. You let me off the hook. Nobody's going to be mad. Like Mark say everyone loses.
Everyone loses.
Right? I'm not mad at Mark. Because it's so fucking close to true that I just give him a pass, right? Like, it's not like he's full of shit. It's just so almost true that it's basically true. But it ain't true. Not everybody loses. Khabib's never lost. If he retired tomorrow, Khabib never lost, and Mark's full of shit when he says everybody loses. Fucking Floyd Mayweather, I don't think he's going to lose now. He's not going to take a fight he could lose in any way. Why would he, right? And John Jones may be one of those. But he's got to do that on the night against a guy who has developed that feel in reality, and I think that's the biggest, if we take a last thought on Anthony Smith, that's the biggest difference between him and any of these guys, is he learned it by trial and error, by success and failure. Cormier never fucking lost. There was no success and failure. Holy shit, that's completely wrong. How do I retool? What do I have to learn? What do I have to change about my relationship with fighting to make this work? Cormier never had that. Gustafsson barely had that. AJ beat him, and there was Jones beat him.
He had it early in his career when he fought Phil Davis. Then
true, and it did change him.
Became better.
It did change him. He became better. Yeah, he became better. He did. So there's a great example. But it wasn't enough.
But see, I was just about to say that's he was a young lion at that time. Then when the second fight for Jones, married, kind of settled in. You don't want to leave your country, So I doubt. I'm not 100% sure, but I doubt he spent that much time training at Alliance for that title fight.
No, but it's this is
all
these
I get
things
it. There's
matter.
Quality training partners there and all that, but history proves itself that if you had tremendous results going to this one place, why wouldn't you want to go back?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? And for many people, it's because of other things, and they may choose very logical things. My family or my kids or my whatever is here, so therefore I can't this. It's your life. By all means, if you want to spend more time with this, and this isn't the case here,
of course,
in a case where you'd say, I can't go to Albuquerque or California or whatever because of my family, that's your life. You only got one. Do what's right for you. You're not put on earth to make me, or fucking just bleed 420 on Twitter or whoever, do it for us. And legacy isn't necessarily more important than any other aspect of your life. So you do what matters to you. But another, I know I said last thing a few times, but keep getting thoughts that I think are interesting and maybe provoke conversation, although nothing provokes conversation like picking a side and arguing it to the death. I just think we're all a little tired of that. I think we're going to get away from that. And we see it. We see it. Joe's 3-hour podcasts and Dr. Peterson and fucking that British guy who was in Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. These people do 3 and 4 hours of pontificating. Why? Because fucking we can think now. We don't have to choose a side and fight to the death anymore.
That is until Dan announces Khabib versus Conor 2.
Yeah, once he announces Khabib versus Conor 2, we just pick a side and fight to the death
Back
again.
to World War again.
That's what we'll do. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm really, we could have a lot of these same conversations about Usman and Woodley. And one of the things I said I would circle back to about Stylebender, about Izzy, is the very difference. I hope this is a simple concept. If in my left hand is Matt Hughes and in my right hand is John Jones, the way that they are different, one day in my left hand will be John Jones and in my right hand will be a new one. Yeah. And Izzy is one of these new ones. And when is he fighting Anderson? It's next weekend already. So we might get to it Tuesday when we get together. Anderson versus Izzy can be that. It can be that. Anderson fucking, this whole two faces looking at each other with the graphic up and the space between them is what they're manipulating. That was Anderson Silva earlier. Well, maybe there's a third dimension. Maybe it's made out of clay now. Maybe you spin it. Maybe you see it from a different perspective. But it all goes deeper because that's how our brains evolve. So whatever that next step, that could be Izzy. Could be Izzy Adesanya. Anderson Silva can feel it, and I'm not saying he is, but he can, and plus he's slowed down potentially. Either him or John Jones or whoever can one day feel as dated in the way that they fight to the way that we now see early Vitor Belfort versus Vanderlei Silva. Yeah. Awesome fight. Don't get me wrong. Just a different era. Leather helmet football, those old black and white things, they're carrying the thing with their leather helmet to now. As different as that is, if football continues, and I don't think it will, too much brain trauma and attendance is down and the NFL's old and they don't let people share their footage and there's a lot of reasons to think football may actually get in trouble in the next 5 years.
Stuff,
yeah. But if it did, today's football would look like leather helmet era to 10 years from now football. And that goes on forever. And just because John Jones is a genius today, in 10 or 15 or 20 years, depending on how fucking ahead some of these guys are, somebody else makes them look old. Izzy is one of these guys who has the potential to make these guys look old. Willie, hey man, I don't know. I can't see the future. So, potential versus experience. Aaron Pico, I am a big fan of yours, sir. I'm a big fan of the way that I watch you work. Big fan of your mindset and your drive and your desire and your performance. I think you're going to be everything that you dream of being. And I'd like to tell you that losing is a big part of that path. I'm sure you know this. I'm sure that some guy sitting in a little podcast place with a couple of cheap lights and his friend Mark working the thing isn't the right guy to necessarily tell you this, but you know that losing is a part of the path of greatness. But the conversation is about potential versus experience and the role that it plays, the role that experience plays. And it's a really interesting one because a lot of what you see, and again, Aaron or anyone like him may find a loss or something, a setback, to be like some sea change in his life or a disastrous outcome. It's just a fucking another day. It is, it's another day. And he's got 2 losses now. And why do we care? Because he's fucking great and we all know it, right? But we also care because we're watching on one hand, and I think for me, this is the value we can all take from this, if we choose to. On one hand, we're watching someone who's, I'm holding up my left hand. I don't know what hand it looks like on YouTube, and if you're listening on podcasts, I'm holding up my left hand. On one hand, he is living in a state of constant improvement. That's exactly where a guy like this should live. Potential. Potential means you could achieve certain things. You can become certain things. The most you can become is you can actualize your potentialities. That means whatever your genes say are the maximum big or strong or fast or fluid or learning or how many languages or whatever that potential is, which almost no humans probably ever achieve it, the maximum you can do is grow into that. That's called actualizing your potentialities or actualizing your potential or becoming your potential. You do that through hard work. Aaron Pico, you do it also through learning. So if you're Aaron Pico or any other person with the potential to be great, because let's start quickly with why he is great and can be great. Well, you start with very young. We start when our brains are super elastic and malleable, we start learning skills. Why would it be great for Mark to learn jiu-jitsu at 3 compared to me at 13? Well, he'd have 10 years earlier, right? Wrong. That's a very small part of it.
It's because my body grew into it.
You'll learn way more, but you'll also learn how to learn. And it won't be 10 years. It'll be the way that if you keep investing money in your fucking RSP, it grows and it gets interest on interest and it starts to balloon. It's the same thing with learning how to learn. It's the same thing with training his body to move a certain way. Now, as he moves his body that way, it physically forms in ways that support that movement. The brain actually carves pathways, neurotransmitter pathways, to teach your body to move that way. So when you start really young, and you teach somebody to play piano, why the fuck can you go on YouTube right now and see, Mark, do you watch these fucking 7-year-olds on YouTube doing anything?
Oh, yeah, like the little drummers and all that kind of stuff.
Like, fucking skateboarders and climbers and fucking guys
they almost look like savants when they do it. You're like, wait, how?
Yeah, exactly. So back in the day, we'd say that was a savant. Now we understand that what you did was bring together their joy of learning with something that they liked and quality instruction for what is short periods of time, but from 3 to 7 is a fucking long time. It's more than, it's 60% of your life, 55 to 65% of your life, more than half of your life. Forming in the times that you learn language, you put together complex ideas, you string together communication, all of these things, and now punching or kicking or skateboarding or piano or what did you just say? What was that?
Like drumming.
Drumming or climbing. These fucking kids are geniuses because the level of knowledge that we pass to them is much higher than we had. The level of how they can learn it is much higher, and they're starting even younger. So when you get these greats of a particular sport, you have all of that. So it's not just potential. My potential, when I started fighting at 38 years old, was quite limited. Whatever I could possibly achieve, I would push as hard as I could. And if I started martial arts as a young man, but I didn't fight. I couldn't see, I had bad vision. There was a number of things, and I didn't have the drive. So that's the other part I'm looking for. Highly driven as an adult, but as a teenager, things weren't like, unless I was curious or obsessed with it, and I was obsessed with martial arts, but you have to be obsessed with practice, you have to be obsessed with learning, all of these things. Also, work ethic, you learn that. So then we add to it environment. Who were your parents? Were they supportive? Did you have a coach that mattered? Did you have some good fortune? Outliers, the book, it's right there in the shelf. I think if you look in the top shelf to the left, you'll see the book Outliers. Outliers, fantastic fucking book, by the way. Top shelf, slightly left, white book. Malcolm Gladwell, not perfect. Gladwell's a fantastic writer. Imperfect. People always look for his weaknesses. That's uncool. Outliers looks at the fact that you could literally just happen to have, like Bill Gates or what's his name from Apple?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. They happened to live in a place where there was a computer before there were computers, right? There was a university with computers they could access. Mm-hmm. So if in 6 years computers are going to start to be a big deal and no one understands them and I get to fucking use a computer, of course I'm going to be on the front end of it. Same thing we teach somebody as a kid. They get access to all that. Then if you get lucky and you happen to have one of the great coaches around, well, now we've added an outlier or two. So all these things come together. Then you get environmental, you get support and encouragement, and that starts to form you. So the genes of an Aaron Pico allow him to be great. The environment allows him to access wrestling as a young guy. Some outliers, maybe there's a brilliant coach or something. The environment, family.
You just described Khabib's family.
Yeah, fucking Khabib's family is just like, get him a bear.
Father, coach,
yeah,
supportive family, wrestling, the region area, like everything is built in for them.
Almost all the greats are like that. And once a sport or an art matures, all the greats are like that. It becomes really impossible today to be, and I know this is an outside example, but to be great at horse racing if you didn't grow up with a fucking horse, exactly. Right? Like if you didn't get on one at 3, and that's an outside thing, but which is also why there's so many brilliant soccer players. Because you know what I fucking need? A soccer ball, right? We can learn this. We don't have necessarily the coaching, but from 3 years old, you start obsessing over it. It's possible. All of these things come together, right? Then, so you need the genes, you need the environment, you need a couple of key outliers, you need some good fortune, you need a family that can facilitate it. Then you need the work ethic and the drive and the commitment to it. Some of that is genetic, some of that is environmental. Now all of it's coming together. You watch and I reached out to Aaron's brother because I do some work for DAZN for Bellator, and I don't know if everyone knows that, but I do. And I love it. I love the DAZN people, and I love the Bellator people. And I reached out to Aaron's brother, and so, I've always been following and you can see a lot these days just with Instagram and people in the gym and a lot of footage. This motherfucker works like crazy. And somewhere in it, somebody told me specifically out in the world that they had to sit Aaron down. He was going to work too hard. And they had to explain to him the idea that a horse will run until it's dead if you don't stop it. And that was him. So what does that mean? Well, there's guys who train themselves so they fuck their bodies up. Aaron would be one of these guys. But with the right people around him who can find just the right way to go, you'll train yourself to death and then blow out your body. All of it has to come together. Then you got to have the mindset, obsessive mindset. Again, some is genetic, some is learned, some is through trial and error, some is through success, some is through failure, some is through people saying you can't do it, some is through people saying you can do it. All of it comes together, and we find ourselves in the world where you have this genius athlete who, more importantly, or as importantly, wants to achieve greatness on a level that's never been seen, obsessively. Get some other good fortune. His partner, his girlfriend, is his nutritionist. Documented. All the people around him all support this. This is all there now. And he has the mindset to do it. And he didn't get any, there's not a lot of, well, he's lucky. He's made a lot of this. He's created this. He's improved the weaknesses, found the things. Now you're there. Okay, all that's right. All of it's correct. You look at the coach, or the mental coach, the studying of all these things, you add all of that. So all of that is there. So that all is in my left hand. Here's where I think some of the flaws come. This stuff is all that matters. Growth, improvement, continued evolution. And with that, you know what people like that often are? They're impatient. And that's beautiful. I got to get better. I got to train harder. I got to improve. They're impatient with that. And that's okay. That can be a great thing. But then on this hand, completely unrelated to any of that bullshit is if I beat this guy, then I'll get a title shot, then I can... All of that makes no sense to this. It's got nothing to do with it. It's not, we could use the word distraction. It's not a distraction. It's a completely separate living thing. And once you start putting those things together, this one fucks up this one. And in this one, if you're listening to the podcast, the right hand being the thing that title shots, who do I fight next? I want to fight a top 10 guy. You know, I want to like make sure that I do my media, whatever. That shit fucks up the important shit.
And Aaron, for his credit, has been dealing with that for a very long time.
Fuck yeah.
When he was a teenager, before he had a pro fight, just when he signed his Bellator, I think he even signed his Bellator deal, he had a deal with Dethrone Royalty, like the clothing company.
Yeah. I know.
You know, he was already an athlete in their eyes.
Yeah, and he is an athlete, and he is a genius athlete, and he is all these things, and he does belong there. But none of that shit has anything to do with the important shit. The important shit is get better every day until you have achieved your true potential. His potential is so fucking high because of all of the things that you didn't. And listen, don't ever fucking be jealous. We all are where we are. Out of hundreds of thousands of us, there could have been 100 Lance Armstrongs that had this part of it or that part of it, but only when it all comes together for a lifetime to put you in this situation does that happen. When you are there, if you care, if this is who you are, if this is authentically you, you owe it to the potential to continue, and it is by this point a part of who you are. You are only exist. Aaron Pico and people like him, their primary purpose of existence is to actualize their potential. It's a beautiful fucking thing to see. It is a beautiful thing to see. It should inspire us all because we can achieve our potential. And I know I can't be the discus the Canadian Olympic discus gold medalist, but I got a lot of potential, and so does everybody. That's real. That's not shit motivational speakers say. Everyone has the potential to be massively more than they are today. Your job is to achieve that through self-study, hard work, and constant improvement. So that's what matters to Aaron Pico, just as that's what matters to all of us. When he lost, which is a part of growth, he was like, I don't know, if it means I got to fight lower level guys, then fuck this stuff, irrelevant. Do I fight lower level guys? Maybe I should wait for the title. So, and impatience, I'm going to talk about that in the fight itself. But and again, I don't know him, although I've watched him closely and I was put in a position to be able to follow him. It just didn't come together through DAZN. Some others did with him. I don't know this for sure, but that impatience is driven by accomplishment, okay? He's the only accomplishment that matters to the Aaron Picos of the world and to all of us is the accomplishment of being better than we were yesterday. If we focus on that, the accomplishment of one day being a world champion or becoming a father or joining the police force or reading 100 books or losing 50 pounds or whatever, those accomplishments will happen easier if you focus on constant improvement every day. I've been down this road myself. How do I get the job fucking commentating the UFC next to my buddy Joe Rogan? Irrelevant. I cannot manipulate those pieces, and neither should I. What I can do is become so fucking good that either that happens or my life changes in such ways that I don't even want that anymore. That you can control. That all of us can control. We worry about improving every day. So while Aaron is sitting there thinking, how do I be a title? How do I be a champion? When do I be a champion? Can I be a champion at 45 and 55? Those are consequences of winning fights. Those are outcomes. Those are destinations. They're not, you can't fucking control that. You can get better every day. Now, if we take that mindset of he is getting better every day, but he desperately wants to achieve these outcomes, that then comes into the fight. I mean, did you think he looked impatient in those moments as a brilliant artist having a brilliant fight?
When he hurt him?
When he got hurt, when he got knocked out, he stood in there, wanting to finish it. Because if I finish it, my hands are raised. If my hands are raised, holy fuck, I had another highlight reel knockout. All of that, because and he talked about it as when I saw a bit, he thought it was a strategic error. That if at that point instead I grapple him, well, but it's not it's a philosophical error, and that philosophical error is driven by thinking about and focusing on outcomes, winning, more than focusing on constant improvement. And when Mark brought up this question, potential versus experience, Aaron Pico, he was talking about cage time. And that's where this concept was introduced. And when you're laying guys out, you don't have the time to learn to connect to those moments in the cage and feel it and live it and be in it and allow it to happen. You allow the fight to happen. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I'll tell you fucking, Izzy Stylebender would tell you that. He allows the fight to happen. The greats do it. And Aaron Pico's a great. He's just trying to make it happen instead of allow it to happen. And so, because he doesn't have that experience in there, it looks there. At lower levels, it's been there. Fuck, I'll get that guy out of there. That left hook and that one, the guy is incredibly talented and a wonderful fighter. But he allowed those to happen, or he made them happen because the test, the challenge, the danger was reduced compared to his skill level. Right?
Right.
Making sense?
Yeah.
Fuck. There's so much in these moments. There's so much in these fights, This isn't about, the punch or being in a hurry. Eddie Alvarez was like, yeah, I saw Eddie, because we're all interested in this kid. And I think we're more interested because this is hard, right? I think 5 years ago, we'd have been like, holy fuck, Mike Tyson knocked out everybody. Ronda Rousey took them all out. John Jones is unstoppable. But don't we care more because it's actually hard? This is all of our lives.
And for us, like MMA fans and whatnot, he's our first in the sense of, not for Mike Tyson and whatnot, but he's our first LeBron James. Like Shab said, this is the first time you've seen a blue chip prospect come into the sport, physically gifted, really good fight, really sharp, really strong fight IQ, and where you just see, like, how good can he possibly be? Like, there's no ceiling for him.
And that's this hand. But this hand is like, how good can I be is what can I become in the way I become a martial artist. In my right hand is what can I become as far as a champion, a 2-division champion, a millionaire, a legend. These things aren't the same. And that philosophical difference, man, it's going to be fuck. And he already gets it. This guy's smart. He cares. I bet you he's feeling incredible anguish because of this, the right hand, the outcome, winning and lose. Winning will happen. Titles will happen. Championships will happen. Legacies will happen if you worry about the left hand. And you just get better every day and get better at performing and get better at growing and get better at feeling it. All of that. What Robin Black or Brendan Schaub or Joe and Brendan and those guys watching it or fucking people on Twitter or any of those, none of that shit matters. The outcome doesn't matter. The title doesn't matter. None of it matters. What matters is that. But that sure leads into part 3 nicely. But go on.
It should, yeah. But I do have a separate question just because this has been bugging me. And this might be a little bit controversial just because of, everything leading up to it. Now, Aaron Pico, TJ, and Cub all train together under that Sam Calavita guy. Now, I'm not saying there's anything that has to do. They just train together, which obviously means they spar together.
Yeah.
Cub's last fight, even though he got tapped by, I think it was Moicano, he got dropped to get to that point. Yeah. TJ dropped. Yeah. Pico dropped. Yeah.
I mean,
I think it might be due to hard sparring because based on the 3 of those guys, you put them in a room together and they're just natural.
So, yes.
Fierce competitors.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Now, we all... I shouldn't say this. Correlation or does not equal causation.
Right.
And coincidence can seem like correlation, which does not equal causation. However, it's certainly possible. But what we cannot do is go, yes, this is it, that's what's happening. But is that possible? Again, we looked at what had to happen to make Aaron Pico where he is today with this potential. along this. So what did Brendan say? LeBron James? Yeah. So whether it's LeBron James or Aaron Pico or anyone else, to get to the point they are at required 1,000 things to go right. And when the things go wrong, we could fix them. So there was an injury, no problem, we could fix it. We lost the key coach, no problem, we came back. Oh, he went through a period where he had a girlfriend who was a little bit crazy. Oh, he didn't get her pregnant. Like, whatever it is, there's normal parts of life. You know, he got in trouble with the law. Oh, he did just normal parts of life, right? All these things had to happen to get to here. You know what else had to happen is they don't get fucking so injured that they can't compete in basketball or fighting.
Right.
That is one of those series of crazy things. And you know what? You get 5. I bet you there were 3 LeBron Jameses. 2 of them, who would have been LeBron James, had knee surgeries and fucking never got there. Even to get to where Aaron Pico is today has to include not getting so hurt he can't fight. And the next one, from today to his potential, to actualizing potential, has to be don't get brain damage or injuries so that you stop progressing. And that same thing, the horse will kill itself if you don't stop it from running. And Aaron Pico's so driven. TJ Dillashaw's so driven. Cub Swanson are so driven. They love it so much. I bet they fucking love each other in this incredible way. Yeah. They can push it. Yeah, of course that's dangerous. Of course it is.
Yeah, no, and the only reason why like that thought came up is because
DC and fucking Kane and what's his name? They said that about those guys.
Oh, and Rockhold, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the reason why, because we were talking about, you know, the inexperienced part and the age thing, just, you know, versus the potential. When you're that young, and even though Aaron's probably had 10,000 plus, you know, countless hours training and whatnot, is this when you're young, people do have to pull him back, right?
For sure.
In any gym, they always pull the young guys back. And that's the same
with hurting each other.
Right.
These guys will hurt each other. For sure. Yeah. You need the right people there. Yeah, it's all of that is a part of it. But I will give you this. I will tell you this. Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold. They won titles in 4 weight divisions. 4 titles in 3 weight divisions, right? And that doesn't include, you know, anybody who has won and then come back. I think, has Cain been a champ twice? Didn't he? I can't remember. I can't remember. They didn't strip people back in the day like they do now. I don't know. Irrelevant. You take those guys. This would be a natural response. No judgment on this response. Feels logical. You look at them and you say, champion, 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 champion. Sorry, there's only 3 of them. Champion, champion, champion. You know, yeah, but man, they shouldn't spar so hard. Don't spar so hard. Maybe this one never came champion. Maybe this one didn't get there. I left up at this finger. Good thing I didn't leave up this one. I don't want to be rude. You know what I mean? These things are all fucking part of the stew. Mm-hmm. These guys are great champions. I wish they didn't spar so hard. If they didn't spar so hard, maybe they wouldn't be champions. Because that level is what prepared them. That, what's the word I'm looking for? Inoculated them. You know, condition them. There's another sense of it created the world in which they could handle these moments. You take that away, and they aren't the same guy. Luke Rockhold is not Luke Rockhold if you remove even fucking a hard round with Cormier. Never mind if you remove 20 or 30 or 50 or 80 hard rounds. Or you take those 80 hard rounds and push them to the limit and you ease him down a bit. He's a different man. It isn't like all good don't get hurt. That's part of them. But of course, there's a downside to that. If they've all been injured different amounts. Kane's coming back, something we'll talk about next week. But it's part of it. If you get the type of damage, the type of wear and tear, and again, you know, complete conjecture. There's no evidence of any kind.
Exactly.
TJ could get knocked out 3 times in a row,
right,
and he won't. But there would still be no evidence of any kind. You could say, oh, he's sparring too hard. Could be entirely unrelated, medically speaking. So we can't say. But, of course, this is part of that same thing. To get to that point where you have actualize your potential, like I believe Aaron Pico will, requires all of these things to go correctly. And the way that you do it is you fucking stop worrying about consequences and outcome and strategies and fucking paths to titles. And you worry about, how do I find the way to be the perfect amount of art, athleticism, learning, improving your abilities to improve your abilities, know when to hold back. And fucking those guys aren't going to necessarily hold back. TJ won't. So you need the right coaches. If somebody is in there that just isn't a little too much over or a little too much under, we might not achieve our potential. So all of that has to come together. And having said that, when we see John Jones, when we see the true greats, Cormier, when we see the true greats, realize it isn't just, wow, amazing, look what they did. It is thousands of small things that all happen to make that happen. And there's every chance, more than most, that Aaron Pico will be one of those true greats. But it's a path. It's a long path. And on that path, an important part is losing. If you saw our earlier segment, if you've been along for the whole show, that's a part of why Anthony Smith is where he is. He lost. He lost at important times. It's a key part of it. But we'll go into segment 3 with this.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Not worrying about titles, not worrying about, the path, consequences, outcome, even goals to a degree, or understanding how to set goals. Jose Aldo doesn't want to fight for the title anymore. And that's awesome. That is awesome. That's fucking awesome. So this will be our last segment of the day. It's been a lot of fun. It's fucking great to be in here. It makes me better, and it helps me realize where the flaws are and stuff. But this one I really like. There's a lot here. There's a lot here. So, and the question for myself is, where do I start? Jose Aldo and motivation. Well, we talk about Jose. Let's quickly establish this is the greatest featherweight of all time, according to Max Holloway, who is the greatest featherweight of all time, by the way, currently. And I think he is. I mean,
yeah.
Didn't he beat everybody, including Jose Aldo, twice? Jose Aldo's the greatest of all time, says Max Holloway, which is fucking cool of him. That's a kid who understands how to appreciate the greats that came before you. But Jose is a brilliant special fighter. Amazing. So let's just talk about him as an individual for a moment. If I'm Jose Aldo, fuck the title. Fuck all of that stuff. Fighting is a wonderful thing. It's what he's dedicated his life to. He's free in the cage. He's made his living at it. He's accomplished everything in the world. Max Holloway says he's the greatest. We all know it is true. Him and Max are the greatest. Conor McGregor, hey, fuck, this happens. You get hit. This is one of the greats of the era. Fuck the title. You've been the champion. Fuck the title. And before I go further onto that, let me pull back a little bit. What is the UFC title? Now, I want you to know, I want to explain that I don't have a bias here. I don't have a dislike for it. I don't want to undermine it. I don't want to knock this thing that people dream of doing and chase their whole lives. I don't want to overly celebrate it for ways just because that's what you do. I just want to ask what it is. And at its best, what it is and the title is the title given to the person who is the best in the world at the time. Now, I'm not talking about a belt. Mark, can you grab my belt carefully? That if you can't, because there's a lot of shit there and glasses and stuff, then don't bother. If you can, and careful, that pipe thing is very loose. So I have a belt. I only fought 9 times, and I got it in my 4th fight, and they said I was the Canadian champion. Now, is that able to be gotten? Don't do it if it's a hassle. Okay. So I asked Mark to grab this, not because it's a big accomplishment, and I don't mean to criticize myself or, where I want it. What does this thing mean to me? Well, I was a guy who started fighting late in my life because of a love for fighting, and I never had a dream ever in my life I would compete for a title. This organization was called Elite One. It was on the east coast of Canada. Very, very cool people with a passion for martial arts. And this belt was put up for the Canadian Bantamweight, Elite One Canadian Bantamweight champion. Now, at that time, in 2007, and it's up on a rack that Mark pulled down carefully because it means a lot to me, right? Was I the Canadian champion? I only had my second win, and it was against the same guy. Honestly, and they put the belt up because they were offering me $1,000, which was pretty good money in 2007. But I'd already beat him, and I was hoping to achieve bigger things. And they put this title up, and I'm like, fuck. I would have never dreamed as a fight. My first fight was 10 days before my 39th birthday, and I would have never dreamed that one day I'd have one of these things. This thing fucking means so much to me because what it does is when I look at it, it is my entire career. 9 fights, wins and losses, training with great people, traveling, being injured badly, crying myself with a type of anguish I've never experienced, being in the hospital, having all of it. It's all represented in that. And so I love it. But if I was, and let's go back to, real high-level fighters here, not analysts who fought for a bit late in their life. But real fighters, this is not a thing. This isn't a thing. This doesn't have a meaning. Being the champion has a meaning. When you are the champion, they have put everybody out into the world and they've said, on planet Earth right now, you are the number one. And the heavyweight boxing champion in the world or the heavyweight UFC, champion or whatever, it says of everybody out there who's learned to fight, doesn't know how to fight, trained in artistry and combat and athleticism and the desire and all of it, you are the man. Now, that is what the title is. You are the fucking man in the world. There is no disputing the fact that you are the best fighter of anybody walking the planet that weighs anywhere close to you or whatever. Now, as a signifier, what is the Super Bowl? And we do this. I don't know how we do it or why, but the Super Bowl is the champion of all of it. You are the best team there is. That's a title. And that title means something. And this doesn't need to mean as much to us as it means to Jose Aldo or, fucking Max Holloway or Ronda Rousey or anybody who's achieved it. But to them, they can walk into the room and say, in the whole world, you are the best. Now, as a thing to signify that, take this thing home. Take this thing home. Put it on your wall, and forever, you can look at that thing and go, holy fuck, I accomplished something. You can show your children. This is just an object. The title is being the greatest. That means something. A belt doesn't have meaning unless you apply meaning to it. It's just a fucking belt. It can hold up your pants. It can be shiny, whatever. The world that we live in, the belt, people are like, we want to win the belt. And then you hold the belt. This thing is just a thing. It's like a cup or like whatever. It's not the title can mean something. Being a champion can mean something. And I'll tell you, Jose Aldo was a proud champion. The belt doesn't mean something. And even the title doesn't mean something. Being a champion means something. What does it mean today? Well, once upon a time when Jose Aldo was the featherweight champion of the world, he was the WEC featherweight champion and then came over. Mark, can you just pull him up on whatever? Came over and he was I think he had to fight Uriah Faber for the WEC.
He fought Uriah Faber in California, WEC event.
Yeah.
UFC, Rogan and Goldie were on the call, came out to run this town tonight.
Yeah.
That was when he chopped
amazing.
leg off.
And then when he moved into the UFC, he was the UFC champion. Then he wore that belt for years. That meant something. He was the champion of the world. He was the greatest in the world. That's shit to be proud of. This thing, as I said, I'm not criticizing. This means a lot to me because it's an object to which when I look at it, I remember my wife coming in the cage when I got it, and I remember people congratulating me, and I remember fucking, getting surgery on my eye and losing and being my mom seeing me get submitted and how devastating that felt. That all I've applied to this object. That's what that is. It's an object to which you apply stuff. Now we got to have a belt in every picture, and it can't have the meaning. Jose Aldo was the only UFC featherweight champion ever. Now, since then, let's take a list. Somebody was the champion, Connor and Max.
That's it.
Fuck, that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Now, some of the other ones, at one time, when Randy or Chuck or Tito were champion, it was like, there's been 4 or 5 of them. Now there's been dozens. And at any time, you're not even the champion. There's another one. Now, why is that so? Because marketing people in some department somewhere say that maybe because of metrics, which are measurements of how people buy things and watch things, either metrics say or they believe or a combination of both. And by the way, metrics can be coincidence. Well, the 6 title fights we had were higher than the 3 non-title shows, so therefore it's people care about titles. But for whatever reason, we need a title in every show. Now we have many shows. That means we need more titles. If there's more of something, value is in scarcity. If something is scarce, it's inherently valuable. If there's more of something, its value goes down. This is life, right? This is economics.
I forgot to mention, just to add on to the point before, Jose is a 2-time champ. Because he beat Frankie.
Yeah, that's right.
UFC
Fuck, that's and Jose Aldo will have that forever. And Frankie is a brilliant champion in his own right. Think of that. Everybody is 180 pounds, and you're 153, and you beat them all. Yeah. And when I say 180, the lightweights, like Gray Maynard would have got up to 180 pounds. On fight night, Frankie was 153.
Benson
I mean,
Henderson.
that's the fucking champion.
Ben Henderson was huge.
Yeah, Ben Henderson, 180 pounds, right? Frankie Edgar was 153. You're the fucking champion. Now, the object that you get is what it is, what it means to you, but we have used it as a marketing tool to say to everybody, look, there's a title. Now, that matters to people who don't really know, but to the rest of us, does it mean what it meant? And I'm not trying to undermine a company that I enjoy analyzing their fights and talking about. I work for the broadcast partner in Canada. I'm not trying to fucking put a negative spin on something. Factually speaking, if there's more of something, its value drops. That's not Robin Black. That's economics, right? That's just the truth.
Yep.
So then it becomes part of selling a fight. It becomes, once upon a time, rankings, titles, belts, conflict, Connor and Jose, all of these things, and you talked to Matt Hume about it. I've seen him say this before. I think he said it to me when I've been in a room with him. All of these things existed to keep our attention long enough to teach us about fighting. And I believe now, more than ever before, if you can show a 23-year-old the art or the science or the philosophy or where lessons can be learned in fighting that transfer to life, that's what the fuck everybody's doing on Instagram. Why the fuck are my 1-minute breakdowns now consumed 75 million times? Because it's about punches and kicks. It's about meaning, right? And it's not about technique. It's not showing the technique. It's not explaining the science. It's about showing meaning. For a lot of us, and Jose Aldo fucking knows meaning in a fight. He's lived in it, and it means fucking everything to him when he's in there and when he wins. See that who did he beat?
Jeremy Stevens.
Jesus fuck! You see the emotion on that.
We were there from Calgary.
Yeah, we were there. Yeah, it was beautiful, eh?
Yeah.
You see the emotion that? Where was the fucking belt that night? Wasn't there? Doesn't matter. Doesn't fucking matter.
But that's the Jose Aldo I'm hoping to see for the next 3 fights when he retires.
Because Jose Aldo was now fighting for love.
He's free.
Love. He's free. It doesn't matter. It's not, again, if you just watched the segment, please go check out the Aaron Pico one. When Aaron Pico is trying to become the greatest he can be, but on the other hand, he's distracted by the route to the title. Those two things don't fucking work together. Sometimes they do by fluke. Sometimes something feeds the other, but for the most part, they are separate things. The goal of greatness and being everything you can be and being your best is different from the goal of finding a way to say a thing on Twitter, to find the way to get the right amount of audience, to demand a thing. So a company that makes their living, makes income by creating scenarios, and you can't control that shit.
It's like they inherently detract from each other.
They are opposites. Yeah. And
but
again, I am not seeking to undermine this, because in doing so, what I'm doing and what I'm not intending to do is insult anybody who loves the fucking drama of it. That's real. That's you. It's authentic to you. You can enjoy that. My opinion doesn't mean shit, and it shouldn't, and I'm not judging. If you fucking love it when Colby fucking tells somebody off, good for you, man. It's a great world. But in some other parts of the world, and this, you know, and they think it's us. They think it's fucking Canada and the US, and we're crazy and we need that shit. And I had a chat with Joe one day talking about promoting of fights. And he's like, you know, on some level, he's like, oh, and fucking Joe will say, Joe quite rightfully has the right to say anything. He's contributed more to fighting than almost any human being who's ever lived, more to the understanding and consumption of martial arts than almost anyone has lived. But Joe will say his true feelings, which is why we love him. And you see it all the time. So I don't have to tell you what he told me. I can pass on what we've seen him say many times. It's a shame that you need to use these things to sell a fight. My feeling is, if we look at the rest of the world and we look at how some other places are doing it, and if you look at somehow other companies are doing it, they don't think that's true. What happens is we believe we need to use a belt, champion versus champion, 2-division champion. They really hate each other. The winner gets a title shot, the same fight. We think we need that because we got in a habit of that. But scarcity is inherently valuable. The second someone creates a meaningful exposition of what's really happening in one of these fights, you'll see a little thing like where people are like, oh my God, really? Because and this is the UFC thing, when I turn on, you know, cable 1500 or whatever it is here, and another one is advertising Bellator, you know, any fucking kickboxing, Glory, all these things I love. Some of the marketing that they'll do, it's one more time, how can we say this undefeated juggernaut is facing one of the toughest, you know, young fighters in the division, and the winner gets a title shot. But the 700th time, it doesn't mean anything. You say something different. You show something different. You peel back some real meaning in there. And all of a sudden, scarcity is value. Over and over again, it is less valuable, and you need more things, and we need 2 belts. And don't be surprised, it's not anyone did anything wrong. If it's about the belt, eventually the belt isn't enough. Now I got fucking 2 belts. And I'll tell you, I get emails from Mayweather Productions, which I've got ever since we covered Mayweather fights. Right. I get emails, and it's like 2-division champ, blah, 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 blah. Nobody sees that anymore. Everybody's a 2-division champ. I saw one the other day. It said 5-division champ. That was how the email fucking opened. I didn't even click through. I don't know who's the 5-division or has won 5 divisions in boxing. It's probably obvious to a lot of people. It's just, I didn't click it through. Because it's like, now we'll need 30 divisions, right? Now we need 3 belts. Who's going to have 4 belts? Because it has less value. 1-minute breakdown. For a week, people will be like, holy fuck, that's the greatest thing ever. Now I'll make 10 a week. And it'll have more value. 10 will have more value than 1, but not 10 times as much, because you know, chocolate fucking comes in giant sacks now. A chocolate bar isn't good. Kit Kat, it's a sack of fucking Kit Kat. This is how we are, right? This is what we are. So stop over and over the same thing, 2 belts, 3 belts, 4 belts, 5 belts. If you show somebody who Jose Aldo is, what he is, what's really happening in there, you know, you show, fuck, we want to be inspired so bad. All of us. Why are we watching fucking all these people all over the place? Motivational speakers everywhere, and they're getting bigger and bigger. Philosophers, modern philosophers. Why are they? Because we're fucking tired of the same shit over and over again. So Jose Aldo doesn't want to fight for the belt, and that's awesome. It is our job to show you why he's great, and it isn't because he's got an amazing low kick. And it isn't because he's got an amazing left hook. And it's not because he's a black belt. And it's because of who he is and what he is. And it's because when we look at Jose Aldo, all of us can become greater by studying his path. The motherfucking guy, no disrespect. I hope that doesn't, I know in Brazil certain terms don't fucking mean that same polite, joking way. That guy lived in the gym. They used to go in there, and I've heard this directly from people. They used to go into that gym, train Jose for the 3rd time for 3 hours each. And that's not conjecture. Back then, that's what the fuck we did. Like, you know, when I was trying to achieve something at whatever level I could, that's how Mark Hominick trained. That's what you did. You go to the gym at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. and you train. Then you eat, then you chill, then you talk about fighting, and you strategize some shit till noon when you train. And then in the afternoon, maybe you take a break, you go eat some chicken somewhere, maybe you take a nap in the gym, and then you train again at night. until we learned that actually was bad, right? You shouldn't do that. But we didn't know. Never mind 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, what those legends were doing. Jose used to live in that gym, and people would go in and train him for the third time that day and go, did you eat? Did you eat? Oh, yeah, I had a patty, you know? This is how he lived.
That's a normal cultural thing for Brazil. Just in certain parts of the world for martial arts, like say Thailand, for example, it is very common for a family living in one village to send their child to a gym,
Thailand,
because they can't even afford to keep the kid.
For sure. Yeah,
to
for
stay
sure.
at the gym, and the kid
or
will
some
fight for
other
the gym, and they'll send
sport
money.
or art or somewhere they can live and be immersed in
happens.
it. Yeah, of course. And that's how. And yes, that story has been told. And if you aren't, again, I'm going now into business and into art and analysis and talking about fighting, because that's interesting too. That's the world I live in. And of course, when somebody says you need to tell that, you get that same him skipping a rope in slow motion, then you get a little bit of fog come in, and then you get the close up of his hand. You got to be creative there too. You can't just go, see, Jose Aldo lived in a gym. He came from nothing, from the streets of whatever, and then trained with this guy. Like, you can't just do that either, right? Because that's been done. And that's why people think it doesn't work, because they do the same shit again. You go in, you fucking tell this man's story. Matt Hume, when fighters fight in Asia and he goes into those rooms, I don't know if this is common. So One Championship's another great organization. Matt Hume goes into I've been told this by people in those rooms. Matt Hume goes into the backstage and he talks about, a number of the things that are going to happen, how it works. And then he has the speech. And that speech includes, you don't have to say crazy shit on the mic. You don't have to call people out. You don't have to fucking jump up and down and do insane shit. You don't have to say you shit your pants. You don't have to say something funny. You don't gotta. And this is what he says. We'll sell you. We'll market you. Now, and again, no judgment. This is not judgment. This is not this is better or that's better. It's simply this is steak and this is chicken. One isn't better than the other. There's not inherent good and bad here. But in the UFC, they'll do the opposite. Go up, when you get that mic, you make sure to fucking use that time properly.
And it all depends on the person. Like, in this world, everyone knows about the infamous Dana White speech. Before the event, he comes in, fires everyone up and whatnot.
And that's beautiful. Dana's fucking... There's a beauty in what Dana is and has always been. And everything about the UFC doesn't exist. The same way that Rockhold and Cormier and fucking DC aren't champions if they didn't spar hard. The UFC isn't everything that it is if Dana wasn't driven and passionate and crazy.
Now, and it depends how you receive it. Now, in that meeting, for example, Dan Hooker was like, okay, all right. Like, he's starting to get, I'm a little hyped up. Behind him is Mike Perry howling like a wolf.
That's authentic. Mike Perry shouldn't be in One Championship. Mike Perry should be fucking right where he is. And you know why Demetrius is over there? Because that's where he should be. One isn't better. Don't judge it. There's not good and bad here, but it's so different. And this would be an irrelevant conversation if not for the fact that that's very successful. We're in North America, so we see the UFC and we see Bellator and we see Glory and we see all these awesome shows. But that's really successful too. And unless you're ready to say, well, Asians are different than North Americans, and I don't believe that. I know that cultures are different, and what we see in our entertainment and how we're exposed to ideas are different, but people are people are people. And that works, and it's growing. And they feel, I've been in Singapore, I've been in the arena, it's fucking crazy. And they tell them specifically, you don't have to do any of that stuff. We'll take care of it. And they do. And that's Jose Aldo. Jose's not going to say the shit now. He doesn't need to. He's fucking Jose Aldo. He doesn't need a thing that you can have 2 of or 3 of or 4 of. He doesn't need any of that. He needs the chance to show martial arts in this case, a cage, ring, cage, field, whatever, cage, against the best in the world. That's what he'll do. And you know what? Don't judge the UFC either. Any of us can have a tendency. Fucking Joe, who was commentator for the UFC, will sometimes go on and I don't like this, I don't like that. You know why? Because it's a real world and not everything is perfect. We lived in this artificial world for a long time where on TV you'd only say nice things and then you couldn't possibly say this and we live in a real world. you know, where some things are good and some things are bad, and your opinion of one thing changes the next day, you know? And don't be mad at the UFC if you don't like Mike Perry. And I don't know who the fuck doesn't like Mike Perry. You know, Mike Perry's awesome. Mike Perry shouldn't even be as good as he is yet, and he is that good because of what he is. We're speaking of who you are and what you are. Mike Perry is fucking special, and he fucking thrives there. And that's awesome. And Jose Aldo can thrive there too, because I'll tell you, they'll go mental, batshit crazy for him in Brazil when he's there, as well they should. It doesn't matter if there's a title or not. It doesn't matter. That special man who's lived a special life of sacrifice will get into the cage in the moments to do what he does best, free to express himself and be the greatest martial artist in the world on that night. Win or lose, because he's facing a young guy who's just as driven, just as special. And we all get to watch it. And we don't need to judge whether. Sometimes I get mad, Twitter beef this, and dumb promotion that, and 3 belts. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just an individual, just like you are. We all see things differently. But every fucking Saturday night, in a perfect world, we turn on the UFC, and somebody gets a Mike Perry, and they fucking love it. I love Mike Perry. I love him. I love him as a guy, too. Mike Perry is an awesome fighter, martial artist, human being, cool cat. Somebody else gets fucking Damian Maia. And somebody else gets Jose Aldo, who doesn't give a fuck about the belt. And somebody else will have 3 belts, and that'll be cool too. In a perfect world, it's all there, right? And I think that world can exist. I don't think it has to be a world only of the fucking everybody's trying to be Conor McGregor. If everybody was Conor McGregor, you know, be the biggest thing in the world?
The guy who isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Scarcity is value. Yeah. You know why Conor was so big? Because he was fucking rare. And he is rare. Even when they imitate him, they can't be him, right? And Jose Aldo gets to be that now. And you know what? In a world where you can't pretend or don't want to pretend to be that kind of thing, be yourself. Jose's deserved that, got the right to. And I hope I didn't say something offensive, because I'm certainly, if your dream is to get a belt or an object, or to be able to put something on the wall and say this thing, to give something meaning, fucking chase it. Jose's done that, though. He did that a couple times. Now you can just go out and be a martial artist, and I can't fucking wait to see it. And I can't wait to see that show. And right now, I can't wait till the next time we shoot, because it's been really fun. This will go up in a few segments and a whole piece, depending on how you watched it. YouTube.com/Robin Black is where to watch the whole piece. And Stitcher, iCloud, iTunes, SoundCloud, blah, blah, blah. Everywhere. Please subscribe. And if you watch this in just a little piece, go back and watch the others. Bink shirts are at shoprobinblack.com. And depending when you watch this, we're going to do 2 next week so that we get rolling a lot more, because it's a real pleasure. And I miss it whenever. As soon as it's done, I miss it already. Thanks, guys. Blackout.